Hi, and welcome to Career Mobility with James Mcilvena for February 2025, the first of this year. James, welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back. I had a nice, long, refreshing break. So, constant reminder of whether you're in job search or whether you're in a role, the important to take some time out and refresh. So, yeah, it was really good. That's why we're doing our first one in February, because I spent the
Yep,
majority of January in Japan.
fantastic. I know you did do a little bit of work there, though. I know you caught up with the team there, the benefits of being part of, I guess, of an APAC and a global team, which is fantastic. But I know you enjoyed some of the fabulous snow action there. So that's really great to hear.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
Awesome. Very good to have you back. Now, we are going to talk today about some of the things that we kind of like following on from last year. We knew that there would be industry trends that we would start to see in 2025. They were sort of predicted in 24, and we've been looking and sort of, some of the information that's sort of out there in the ether at the moment. I've been doing a lot of research in January, and there are a few key trends that we're seeing, certainly inside of career transition and mobility, that we're going to talk about today, and that we think are going to continue to be for this year. So, James, the first one I'm going to talk about, and it's not really surprising because it's everywhere, is AI. So, James, the trends around AI, what have you been seeing now you're back, and what are you thinking are the key things that people need to think about now when it comes to career transition and AI usage?
Yeah, I think two main areas. One is how AI affects selection and application processes. And the second area is actually people are now thinking a lot about how AI impacts productivity and roles. But I'll start with the selection process. So
Yeah.
the bulk of the discussion, and it seems like AI is a real buzzword at the moment and sometimes even incorrectly used, but there is no doubting that most applicant tracking systems, most application processes have now moved to a point where they have some kind of automated screening and stack ranking of anyone who applies on the basis of AI reviewing. Sometimes it's cover letters and CV, sometimes it's only CV, and sometimes it's pro forma questions that are either specific to an organization, specific to a business unit within an organization, or specific to a role. It really just depends on the complexity and maturity of that hiring function about how deep they go in the use of AI when it comes to the productivity of pre-screening. The point in saying all of that is it started to reach a point where it is almost becoming essential for anyone in job search to actually have an understanding of, do I have a CV, do I have a LinkedIn profile that is optimized to support me to get through these processes and not be screened out by the computer? Because it's not even a set of human eyes who are actually
Yeah.
making a assessment that like those terms are roughly the same, and that's okay, this person still goes on the short list. Yeah, it's a zero or a one when it comes to and you're either the zero or you're one, and you're either getting through or not getting through. And so having a AI optimized CV, having a best understanding of keywords in the LinkedIn profile is almost critical. You're going to make more shortlists. Making more shortlists means more interviews. Making more interviews means greater opportunity to actually land and find the right employer, the right role, and actually getting started on whatever's next. And then I think the second point I was making was just around that it's the use of AI to sort of supplement or to support people in roles. And so I think within employers, there's a lot of looking at, what does AI bring if it, and the good in AI, and people have been saying this for a long time, is not to fear that it will take over 100% of people's roles, although in some instances must be called out that it does. Like it completely replaces roles and there's no accounting for that. Hopefully that organisation's had a strategy to see that coming and provided appropriate support to individuals whose roles will be disappearing when they're implementing new technologies. But for the majority of people, it doesn't replace an entire role. For the majority of people, it might actually make you more efficient, more effective. Now, the bulk of employees, the bulk of HR leaders I'm talking to are actually really looking for individuals who want to actually not just use that extra time to, take it, hours out of their week. It's like, how are they then committed to learning and growing with the organization? And while they won't make it a mandatory requirement for people, or most don't make it a mandatory requirement for people, it actually really is the opportunity to think about how people continue their growth and learning in any productivity gains you get through AI. And so whether it's doing the right things to progress your career internally, or whether it's doing the right things to stay relevant to an evolving working world, they're the things that, as time is freed up, more capability to do that. Final point I'll make on this one is it's also acknowledged in some instances the increased rate of burnout and how people are double, triple hatting exactly. Sometimes that productivity gain from AI actually only just gets people back to a reasonable workload in the first place. But where AI is pushing and getting you to such a point where it's actually creating space within a role, being self-driven as to how that space is going to get filled up, waiting for your employer to articulate it, will make you a more valued employee and an employee that will be able to grow with the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really something that's touching every role. And I think, there's initially when AI came out, a lot of people were concerned about how it might take away roles. I think what we're finding is it's definitely adding to every role. There's a role for AI in each, discipline. And now it's just a case of working out if you can harness it while you're in job search, when you go into your next role and you can be upskilled and ready, there's a great opportunity to use it in any role now.
Yeah, and almost this appeared probably first in education. Now it's becoming predominant in job search, right? So there was the people are just writing their essays via AI and submitting them to universities, right? And then the universities got really smart and had software available for the lecturers to be able to say, well, we can actually figure out which components of any submission are AI, and even reach the point where some put out policies saying, hey, it's fine to use it, but this is our expectation of what is individually contributed versus what can be provided through AI. It's very different to when I used to have to go to the library and pour through books to pull out quotes. But
you and me both, James.
but it's a perfect example of, and that's now the job search environment too. So it's expected that people are using AI as part of their submissions, but on the other side, what I was talking about before, the selection process can also tell when something's been 100% written by AI. So if you are using it as a job seeker, use it. It's a great tool. Just be careful that it's always got that human overlay, it's personalized. And if you submit something that's just an AI written cover letter, they know it.
Yeah, I think it's one of my very sort of, I guess, learned people in my network around the AI field. He talks about, we know what good looks like. And I think that's the thing. It's like when you're writing your resume, I mean, work with the branding specialist in the LHH team for sure. They can help you ensure that your, resume is ATS, and so applicant tracking system optimized, because often that is being looked at, of course, by AI as well. But yeah, just making sure that you know what good looks like. If that doesn't sound like your experience, or it doesn't sound like a good overview of what you've done, don't run with what AI is saying. Run with what you know. Like, you're the professional, you know what good looks like, you know what excellent looks like. So run with that. So
absolutely, could not agree more.
The other thing I think in the job search process for AI is also for research. So I think that whole idea of the marketing plan and kind of looking at industries and looking at who's doing what and pulling information together quickly, there is not a better way. I mean, you can Google things still for sure, but sometimes AI is actually going to give you a better insight into industries and trends and things like that. Again, look at it critically, cross-reference it with other things, but it's definitely a brilliant place to start when you're starting to build out lists of companies that you want to potentially work with or target.
Yeah, and if I think of all the time I spent in TA, and it was so abundantly obvious that people were turning up, and if they were asking the question, what do you know about this business that you so desperately want to work for, we hope, what do you know about us? And you could tell they'd researched, they'd probably either on the train in or something, they'd research what they could find on 3 or 4 pages, whatever
Yeah.
was on the company website, and that was it. And to your point,
Yeah.
yeah, you can use AI to actually find a really deeper level of what's going on at the organization. You can actually also use it as part of the networking approach ahead of going and interviewing too. So if I
Yeah.
think about, I've set up a networking discussion with someone who works at company X. Company X is a target organization I'd really love to work for. When I turn up to that networking meeting, I've got all this research and I can actually ask them specific questions and I can delve deeper to things that AI won't know, that only
Yeah.
someone who'd done a networking. And you put those two things together, and well, think about the difference between that to
Yeah.
someone receiving it in an interview, that level of preparation, to someone who's done like a basic web search, website search.
Yeah.
That just doesn't work.
Yeah. I think the other thing I just like to wrap that sort of subject up with is don't be scared of AI. Like there is so much training now available, particularly on things like LinkedIn Learning and so on that everyone in career transition has access to. Jump in and have a look, because even using it at a basic level, as you quite rightly say, can just give you that edge that other people don't have. And just again, use your knowledge and your industry smarts and everything that you already know. Bring that as well. And I call it breadcrumbs, James. I think of it as Hansel and Gretel. The more information you pick up and sort of then test that information in networking meetings, it just makes you more relevant. Like you have something to bring to the conversation. And not it's not necessarily going to have everything right, but if you're curious, it's not about getting it right. It's about having different perspectives to explore.
Yeah, which links to one of the other trends, right? Which is around skills. And so
Yeah.
whether it's interest to acquire new skills or whether it's showing an interest, as you've just articulated, even in
Mm,
just finding out more about the business, one of the most in demand skills is capacity to learn, capacity to grow, and the
yeah.
ability to be inquisitive. And so, such an important thing to be able to demonstrate that
Yeah.
that's what you've done firsthand. You're already showing that you're living and breathing that skill by actually doing that as part of your research.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, let's talk about skill-based things, because we know there's certainly trends, not that people shouldn't go and get degrees anymore. Of course, learning is really important at whatever level you choose to do it. Accreditations do still some have some gravitas in various different industries. However, we are definitely seeing in 2025 a move towards more skill-based hiring for sure. So I'd love to get your take on this, James, and how you're seeing that play out.
Yeah. Look, and I think it's funny sometimes that in literature, in what's being written, it almost perceives degrees and university to actually be an antithesis to sort of
Yeah.
skills based hiring. It's actually not. A degree is just a way to pick up a particular skill set.
Mm,
The main discussion is around the acquisition of skills in a way that doesn't take that same amount of time that it does in an undergraduate degree. And so, hence, you've seen this significant rise in micro learning, online learning.
yeah.
What I think I've taken out of all of my recent discussions with employers, senior HR figures, and also senior execs, when it comes to their view on skills and hiring, um, their biggest, I suppose, concern is how do you assess the quality of the skill that that person has? And so,
Yeah.
where is the balance between self assessment? I tell you I have the skill, trust
Yeah.
me. I have this skill at a really high level, and it'll all be all right when I get into the job.
Yeah.
Um, assessment of the skill, i.e., a formal assessment. So you've had the rise of all of these skill assessment tools like Codality, and it tends to be much, much further ahead and always has been in information technology and communications type roles where they've
Yeah.
got ability to sort of very easily assess you either know how to code, you don't know how to code, right?
Yeah.
It's harder in some other roles to get that same level of assessment of how you demonstrate skill. And so therefore you get to the third one, which is the experience. And so
Hmm.
Still, for a majority of roles and industries where they can't assess through a sort of independent skill assessment, they look for experience. And that's the combination of acquiring the skill, whether that's uni degree, whether that's short course, whether that's online learning, but then the application of it. And there are different
Hmm.
degrees of application, but I think the takeaway from all that when it comes to skills-based hiring is like a short exercise, a short mission for anyone who chooses to accept it is actually, if you've watched this, go and do a quick overview of like what skills are you claiming to have and how strong is your proof points
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you have that skill. So has someone referenced you as being an amazing project leader and they've given you that kind of recommendation on LinkedIn? Have you got a outcome of a project that shows you've used that skill and applied it and you're principally responsible? Like any data points to
Yeah.
back up, particularly your core skills, will make a big, big difference when you get into even early stages of a job search process.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I often, when we spoke about this, when I talk with people, particularly about LinkedIn, you just mentioned recommendations on LinkedIn. There's something really powerful about a third party actually saying this is something that you're great at. And then, if that person ends up being a reference for you, then, again, they can go down a more formal path. But even rich media that LinkedIn enables us to have, I liken it to being if we were all artists, this would be our portfolio of work. So we're professional people. We have professional work that we can showcase. And this is, showing people what we've done, not telling them about it. And it's a real example, of actual work. And yes, qualifications. Sometimes we can cite qualifications, but you're right, James. It's like, what have you done that shows how you've used that and where have you applied it is so important in today's workplace. And that's really what employers are looking for.
Yeah, and employers gravitate to the person who provides them with the most proof points for one
Yeah.
very clear and simple reason. It's lower risk.
Yes. Yeah.
The more proof points you give, the more comfortable they are that you're not going to get on site and a self-reported skill isn't at the level that they need it. Yeah, and this is why there's always this default fallback for hiring managers to go, I want to find a person who's done exactly the role that I want just with a competitor because that minimizes my risk. So everything you're doing to show skills and experience and validate that skills and experience like decreases the risk of that individual going with you as the selection because that's what they're looking to do. They're looking to get someone and they're happy for some level of training to occur, but they
Yeah.
probably have some not negotiables in their head when it comes to skills for a particular role. And they are looking for as much solid proof points as they possibly can to decrease their risk of making an incorrect hire.
Yeah. And we know that application is really important. So we were talking about if you're in career transition currently, what can you do that can actually enable you to start applying some of the skills that you're potentially upskilling and reskilling to? And we talked about, the potential of contracts or shorter term opportunities to actually go in and utilize these skills and apply what you've learned, bring what you already know, but then apply the new as well.
Yeah.
Volunteering could also be another potential avenue as well, whilst in career transition too.
Yeah, I think it is exactly that. I think it's about thinking creatively about how
Mm,
do I have an opportunity, whether it's volunteer work, whether it's helping out a friend in their business, just to be able to
yep.
say you've done like very rarely in this day and age do people push back on an offer for help. Most people feel
Yep.
time poor, overwhelmed, and so very rarely will they push back on an opportunity for help. If you can say, hey, I've learned the skill, we both get something out of this. I would like to get some ability to practically apply that skill, and I think that I could do it in helping you do X, Y, Z. Yeah, that's where you're sort of looking for something that doesn't already exist. The other one, as you said, is if you're in transition and you say, hey, you know what, as I have this discussion with a number of people, hey, I'm getting a little worried about where the bank balance is at. I might look for something shorter term.
Yeah.
Then not looking for just the thing that will top up the bank balance a little bit, but maybe make it that extra benefit of saying, if I can find something that'll help top up the balance, but also help me practically apply a new skill that I've learned, or even if it's a
Yeah.
skill that I know is in demand and I want to bolster my recent experience at applying that skill. You can do both those things,
Yeah.
much more powerful, and you'll get a lot more out of those shorter term contracts than just a feeling that you're not watching the bank balance drain. So I think thinking creatively, because I think one of the common feedbacks that comes from when people are internally upskilling and reskilling and offering people courses is that at the end of that, they don't think creatively about how they're going to apply the skill. And it's like, oh, it's up to the organization now to come and give me an opportunity to apply that skill by putting me in a new role.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same if you're in transition. You can think a little bit more creatively, give yourself a more positive story, and then it links back to now you've got a new proof point or an extra way to justify practical application of a new skill beyond saying I've finished this course.
Yeah. In some ways, finishing the course is only the starting point, isn't it? It's really then about what will you do with that. One of the
Well,
points I just want to make.
and then
Yeah.
the lifespan of the knowledge of that skill, if you just
Yeah.
finish the course and you don't practically apply it, if you haven't
Yeah.
practically applied it within 2-3 months, forget it. Like the
Not going to
majority
live.
of people know that a course without practical application of the skill, 3 months later, most of the content of that course is completely lost. So it's almost like you didn't do it. So practical
Yeah.
application is so critically important.
It really is. And I was just going to say, just on the recommendation side of things, a lot of people ask me about recommendations and people feel a bit weird about asking for them. But in my experience, if you don't ask for them, once you've obviously, you need to have a reason to ask. But if you've done some great work, there's absolutely nothing wrong with asking people. People can say no, and that's okay. But in my experience, you have to ask for recommendations. People just don't find the time. We're all busy. No one just kind of turns up and says, hey, let me recommend you. But again, in job search, I always say it's a bit like putting the air in the tire. It makes you feel good. The confidence is there when someone actually has said, third party, this is what you're great at, and I really appreciate that in you. Again, it's something you can point to, show, not tell. So yeah, just
And
wanted to
just
highlight
on
that.
that, I would guess that 60+% of the recommendations I've given were requested.
Yeah,
And in all instances, I had no issues whatsoever. Didn't mind being asked and had no
yeah,
issues whatsoever doing it, right? Would
yeah,
I have done it off my own bat? No, because I wouldn't have necessarily understood the importance of that individual. And in fact, a lot of instances, it might be people I worked with many years ago, right? And I don't necessarily
yeah,
know that they're in transition unless they're working directly with LHH. But every time someone reaches out and I've enjoyed working with them, no issue. So, if people are going, oh, is it an imposition? It's not. It's actually not. It's actually a little bit of an honour to be asked to, help out. And most people feel really good about being able to write a recommendation if they've enjoyed working with you.
So it's so true. I think most people want to help. It's just, as I say, people get busy. They don't necessarily think. And as you say, we don't know what's going on in everyone's lives all the time. But when we do, we can make that contribution. Thanks so much, James. Is there anything else you'd like to finish up on before we jump into the next
No,
one, which will be next March? Can you
yeah,
believe?
no. Look, I think of all of the things that were the big, trends for 2025.
Mm,
We've covered the ones that are most relevant. The others were like talking about what's driving happiness at work, how people drive connection, culture, and workplace practice. So there's still a lot of discussion about that hybrid in office
yeah,
stuff going on, and then all of the hot and in demand skills. And I think the final point I make is there is actually, we're seeing an increased optimism. We're seeing or hearing from the market that the trend is towards increasing number of roles being released again. Of the big four banks, tipping there's a 90% chance of a rate cut in February. So there's a bit more optimism. Whether everyone's just had a great Christmas or a good January, but the data points show that there's a greater optimism for more opportunity occurring in 2025, and particularly in some of those sectors that have been pretty hard hit over the last couple of years with cost of living.
yeah, definitely a little bit of an upturn. So hopefully we'll have more, positive news to report in March. But again, great to see you. Glad you had a great break, and definitely look forward to catching up again in March.
Wonderful. Looking forward to it too. Thanks, TJ.
Cheers.